Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about bowling at home. We're going to cover the different items you can use as pins, the differences between 5-pin and 10-pin, some different ways you can actually bowl the ball, and at the end we're going to cover the differences in scorekeeping if you want to get into that. So here are some of the options that I found around my house that you can use as bowling pins. An empty pop can would work, just make sure you wash it out first. An old toilet paper roll, a salad dressing container, in my case some creamy coleslaw. But honestly, the best thing I found, and I didn't have it at home, but just an empty water bottle. Those are definitely the best if you have them, but if you don't, make use with whatever you can. Those are just some ideas of things I found around my house. Now, you can set your pins up in either 5-pin or 10-pin. They're scored a little differently and the pins have different values, but 5-pin is set up the way you see here. 5-pin is actually only a Canadian game. It doesn't exist outside of Canada and it was invented here. The more traditional way of bowling is 10-pin, and they're set up the way you see here. It doesn't really matter, whichever one you want to do works just fine. In 5-pin bowling, you actually get 3 rolls at it before the next person goes. And in 10-pin, you only get 2. So there's some differences there, but whatever works for you. Maybe you only have 5 pins to use, then use 5-pin. If you have 10 and you want to do 10, you can do 10 as well. It's more pins to set up constantly, but it's just a little different. Whatever works for you is great. Here you'll see I'm doing the one-step approach, which is really good for our younger students. So I happen to be using a basketball as the bowling ball, but it doesn't matter. Whatever ball or item you can find works just great. I have the ball in my dominant hand, which for me is my right hand. I take one step with my left foot, because that is the opposite foot for me. I bend at my hips and my knees, my arm goes backwards, and then I roll it forwards, and I roll the ball along the ground and point towards my target, towards where the pins are. So this is a really good method for our younger students. For older students, you'll probably want to try the 3-step approach, which is much more of a normal, traditional bowling throw. Here you'll see me doing the 3-step approach. I start in the exact same way that I do the 1-step approach. My feet are together, I'm facing my target, the ball is in my dominant hand. I'm going to step with my opposite foot first, which again for me is my left foot. I go left, right, left, and then I bend at the hips, bend at the knees, and I roll the ball along the ground, finishing with my hand pointed towards my target. This is definitely the better way to bowl the ball. It helps you generate some more power with your step approach, and particularly if you're actually bowling with real bowling balls, they can get fairly heavy, especially in 10-pin, and you're going to want that extra power when you're throwing the ball to help knock down the pins. Now I'm going to talk about the difference between scoring in 5-pin and 10-pin. 10-pin is pretty straightforward. Every pin is worth 1 point, so if you knock down all the pins, that's worth 10 points. If you knock down 3 pins, that's worth 3 points. 5-pin is a little bit different. All the pins have different values. The pin in the front, also called the head pin, is worth 5. The 2 pins beside that are worth 3 points each, and the pins on the far sides are worth 2 points each. So if you knock down all the pins in 5-pin, it's actually worth 15 points. Along with the value of each pin, bowling has strikes and spares. A strike is when you knock down all the pins on your first throw, and you mark that on the sheet with an X. A spare is when you knock down all the pins on your second throw, and you mark that on the sheet with a slash, and you'll see both those things in the scorekeeping section next. In 10-pin bowling, a strike is worth 10 points plus the amount of points you score on your next 2 rolls. A spare is worth 10 points plus the amount of points you score on your next roll. In 5-pin bowling, a strike is worth 15 points because knocking down all the pins is 15, plus the amount of points you score on your next 2 rolls. And a spare is similar. It's 15 points plus the amount of points you score on your next roll. I'll explain this a little more in depth in the scorekeeping section that is next.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a quick round of 10-pin bowling scorekeeping here just to kind of show you how it works. This is what a score frame would look like, and I'm going to kind of fill it in and tell you what I would knock down and scorekeep as we go. So on the sheet, this big section is for the running score. So it's the grand total score you have throughout the game. These little spots are for what you get on each individual roll, and I like to put what I got in that frame total in this section just to help me keep track as I go along. So let's say on my first roll, I knock down 3 pins. And then on my second roll, I knock down 5. So this frame in total, I have 8 points, and as a grand total, I have 8. In my second frame, I knocked down 7 pins on my first roll, and then I missed the rest. So this frame, I have a total of 7 points, and my grand total is now 15. In the third frame, I knocked down 2 pins, and then I knocked down the rest. So that's a spare, and this is the symbol I marked for a spare. And I can't put how many points I got in this frame yet because a spare is worth 10 plus my next roll. So I have to wait and see what my next roll is. So when I roll on the next frame, I knock down 5 pins first. And now I can use this to help me find out what the spare was worth. So it's 10 plus 5, which means I got 15 points in that frame. My grand total here is 30. And I'm gonna roll my second roll on frame 4. I knock down 3 pins. That gives me 8 points this frame, and I just update my grand total to be 38. Now, in the next frame, I get a strike. So I knock them all down on my first throw. I don't know what this is worth yet because it's worth 10 plus what I get on my next 2 rolls. So, in the next frame comes around, I knock down 4 pins, and then I knock down 5 in my second one. That's worth 9 total, and now I know this strike is worth 10 plus 4 plus 5, which is 19 points, giving me a total of 57 total. Here, I can add the 9 to 57, giving me 66 grand total, and I move on to the next frame. This frame, I get a strike, so I don't know what that's worth yet, because I have to roll twice more. In the next frame, I knock them all down on my first roll again, and I get another strike. I still don't know what this strike is worth because I've only rolled it once afterwards. I go to the next frame, and on my first roll, I knock down 4, and then I knock down 0 pins. So this frame, I scored 4 points, but now I can score these strikes. So this strike is worth 10 plus 10 plus 4, making it worth 24 points. So my grand total here is 90. This strike is worth 10 plus 4 plus 0, because my second roll there I didn't knock any down. That makes it worth 14, which makes my grand total 104. And then here I can just add the 4 to that, and it makes 108. I'm not going to do the last frame. There's some specific rules that go with getting strikes in the last frame, but not something we need to worry about. Just score keep the best you can if you want to try it, and next I'm going to go across or go over the 5-pin scoring system, which is a little bit different just because things are worth a different amount. Okay, this time I'm going to go over a 5-pin bowling game of scoring. And in this one, there is 3 spots at the top for each of the rolls because there's 3 rolls. This big spot, again, is for the grand total score. And I like to put my score for each frame in the spot right here just to kind of help keep track of everything along the way. So let's say on my first roll, I get 3 points. On my second roll, I get another 3. And then on my final one, I knock down a pin worth 2. So that's 8 points for this frame, and a grand total for my game so far is 8. In frame number 2, I knock down a head pin first, which is worth 5. And then on my next 2 rolls, I don't knock down any pins. So this frame, I have 5 points. And then grand total, my score is 13. So I have 13 points total. In the next frame, on my first roll, I get 2 points, and then I knock down the rest of them, which is a spare. I don't know what this spare is worth yet, because a spare in 5-pin bowling is worth 15 points, plus my next roll, and I haven't done that yet, so I don't know what it's worth. In the next frame, let's say on my first roll, I get 5 points. Now I can tell what this spare is worth. It's worth 15 points, plus the 5, which was my next roll, making this spare in this frame worth 20 points, and my grand total so far is now 33. I finished playing this frame, and I knocked down 2 points worth on my second roll, and on my last roll, I get 3 points, which works out to 10. This frame is worth 10. My new grand total is 43. In this next frame, I get a strike. A strike, I don't know what it's worth yet because it's worth 15 plus my next 2 rolls. So I don't know exactly what we have yet. I go to the next frame, and on my first roll, I get a 5. My second roll, I get a 2. And my final roll, I get nothing. I now know what this strike is worth because I have a 5 and a 2 on my next roll. I can add them to the 15 over here. making this strike worth 22 points, making my new total 65. This frame is worth 7 because 5 plus 2. Now my grand total is 72. Going into the next frame, where I say I get a strike, again, I don't know what that's worth until my next 2 rolls. I go to the next frame, I bowl my first one, I knock them all down, giving me another strike. I still don't know what this strike is worth because I've only rolled 1 ball afterwards. I go to the next frame, my first roll, I get a 3. That means I know what this strike is worth now. It's worth 15 plus 15 plus 3, which gives me a total of 33 for that frame, and my new grand total is 105. I still don't know what this strike is worth because I've only rolled it once. Let's say on my next roll here, I get a 2. I now know this strike is worth 15 plus 3 plus 2, which makes it worth 20, and my new grand total is 125. And in this frame, let's say on my last roll, I get the rest of the pins, which happens to be worth 10. It's not a strike and not a spare because I knocked them all down on my third roll, not on my first or second, making this frame worth 15 points. And my new grand total here is 140. Again, there are some weird rules that go with strikes and spares in the final frame. I won't bother getting into them, but see what you can do. If you want to scorekeep at home, that's great. If you just want to play without scorekeeping, that's obviously fine too. Hope this was helpful. See you guys next video.